The sun was rising gently over the small town, spreading a soft golden light across the quiet streets. Mr. Johnson sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steaming cup of tea in his hands. His wife, Mrs. Johnson, moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast for their daughter, Maya. The smell of toast and fresh fruit filled the room, but there was a heaviness in the air that food could not lift. Maya, usually cheerful and full of energy, walked in with slow steps. Her backpack hung loosely on her shoulder, and her eyes looked tired, even though the day had just begun. She sat down without saying much, picking at the toast on her plate. Her parents exchanged worried glances. For weeks, they had noticed a change in their daughter. She had once loved going to school, telling stories about her teachers, her friends, and her favorite lessons. But recently, her smile had faded. She had grown quiet at the dinner table, and her joy seemed to disappear when the topic of school came up. Mrs. Johnson placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. "Sweetheart, is everything okay at school?" she asked softly. Maya hesitated. She looked down at her plate, tracing a finger along the edge. After a moment, she whispered, "It just feels different. I don't feel like I belong there anymore." Her parents' hearts sank. They had sensed something was wrong, but hearing the words directly from their daughter made it real. Mr. Johnson leaned closer. "What do you mean, Maya? Did something happen?" She nodded slowly. "Sometimes the teacher doesn't call on me, even when I raise my hand. And during group work, I get left out. When I try to join in, the other kids already have their groups. It feels like I'm invisible." Tears filled Mrs. Johnson's eyes. She brushed them away quickly, not wanting Maya to see her sadness. "Honey, you are not invisible. You are smart, kind, and full of light. If others can't see that, then something must be wrong with the way things are being done at school." Mr. Johnson took a deep breath. He was a calm man, always steady, but he felt anger rising inside him. Not the kind of anger that lashes out, but the kind that aches in silence. He wanted his daughter to feel safe, respected, and happy in her learning place. That morning, after Maya left for school, the Johnsons sat together at the table. They spoke in low voices, sharing their worries. "She is slipping away from her joy," Mrs. Johnson said. "If we don't do something now, she might lose her confidence." Mr. Johnson nodded. "We have to talk to the principal. Not to fight, not to blame, but to explain what Maya is going through. Maybe they don't realize. Maybe they will listen." The decision was made. They would go to the school that afternoon to ask for a meeting with Principal Harris. Later that day, the Johnsons walked hand in hand to the school office. The walls of the hallway were covered with colorful posters and drawings made by the children. But instead of filling them with warmth, those pictures made them ache more, because they wanted Maya to feel part of this bright world. The secretary greeted them politely. "We'd like to meet with Principal Harris," Mr. Johnson said kindly. "It's about our daughter, Maya." The secretary nodded and led them to the principal's office. The door was tall and heavy, and for a moment, Mrs. Johnson felt nervous. She squeezed her husband's hand. They were not there to cause trouble, they were there to protect their child. Inside, Principal Harris sat behind a large desk. Papers were stacked neatly, and a computer screen glowed beside him. He looked up with a formal smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Please, have a seat." They sat down. Mrs. Johnson spoke first. "Thank you for seeing us. We are here because we have some concerns about our daughter. Lately, she has been coming home feeling left out at school. She says she doesn't feel like she belongs." Principal Harris leaned back in his chair, listening with a neutral expression. Mr. Johnson added, "We are not here to complain, but to understand. We want to work with the school to make sure Maya feels included and supported." She loves learning, but lately her spark is fading, and it worries us deeply." There was silence for a moment. The Johnsons looked at the principal, hoping to see understanding in his eyes. But instead, his smile grew tight, almost forced. He cleared his throat. "I see. Well, children sometimes go through phases. It may not be as serious as you think." Mrs. Johnson felt her chest tighten. She had hoped for empathy, for a conversation about solutions. Instead, she felt brushed aside. But she kept her voice calm. "We know children go through phases, but this feels different. Maya is not just bored or tired. She feels invisible. We believe every child deserves to feel seen." Mr. Johnson leaned forward. His voice was steady but firm. "We respect the teachers and the school. But when a child feels this way, it should not be ignored." The principal shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He glanced at the clock, then back at them. His polite smile never reached his eyes. The Johnsons left the office with heavy hearts. They had not shouted, nor had they demanded. They had spoken with love for their daughter. But they walked away unsure if their words had been truly heard. Outside the school, the sun was setting, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. Mrs. Johnson held her husband's arm. "Do you think he listened?" she asked quietly. Mr. Johnson sighed. "I don't know. But for Maya's sake, we cannot give up. If one door does not open, we will knock again until someone listens." And so, as the evening fell, the Johnsons carried both hope and worry in their hearts. They did not know the storm that was waiting ahead, but they knew one truth with certainty: they would stand by their daughter, no matter what. The next morning began with a heavy feeling for the Johnsons. They both tried to smile for Maya as they helped her get ready for school, but their minds were still caught in yesterday's meeting. The words of the principal, spoken with such little care, repeated in their thoughts. When Maya left with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, Mrs. Johnson sat down on the couch. She folded her hands and sighed deeply. "He doesn't understand, Daniel," she whispered, calling her husband by name. "He doesn't see what this is doing to her." Mr. Johnson sat beside her, his shoulders straight, his voice calm but firm. "He may not see it yet, but we will make him see. Yesterday we planted the seed. Today we prepare for what comes next." At the school, Principal Harris was in his office, looking over the schedule for the week. His desk was tidy, and his suit was neatly pressed, but his thoughts were restless. The meeting with the Johnsons replayed in his mind. "They are too sensitive," he muttered to himself. "Children have ups and downs. It's not my job to comfort every parent who feels their child is not happy." But as he tried to brush it off, a small voice in the back of his mind nagged at him. He remembered Maya's name. She was a bright student, often praised by her teachers for her curiosity. He had heard her name in positive ways before. Still, instead of opening his heart, he shut the thought away, convincing himself that nothing was wrong. Later that week, the Johnsons requested another meeting. They walked into the office once again, carrying with them not only concern but also quiet determination. Principal Harris greeted them with the same formal smile, but his eyes revealed impatience. "You're back," he said. "Is there something more?" Mrs. Johnson nodded gently. "Yes, there is. We wanted to share more about what Maya is experiencing. We believe that when a child feels excluded, it is not just a small issue. It affects her whole spirit. She comes home feeling invisible, and as her parents, we cannot ignore that." Mr. Johnson added, "We are not here to criticize the school. We are here to work together. We believe in respect and fairness. We simply want Maya to feel that she belongs here." For a moment, silence filled the office. The principal looked at them, but instead of hearing their words, he saw them as a problem standing in his way. His pride spoke louder than their truth. "I think you might be overreacting," he said finally. His voice was calm, but it carried a wall of distance. Teachers have many children to care for. It is not always possible to give equal attention to every student. Mrs. Johnson's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, determined not to show weakness. "We understand teachers are busy. But every child should still feel seen. If Maya is slipping through the cracks, then something must be done." The principal leaned back in his chair. "With all respect, this school runs very well. We have a good reputation, strong academics, and a caring staff. If your daughter feels invisible, maybe she just needs time to adjust." Those words struck the Johnsons like cold water. It was not only dismissal, it was denial. The Johnsons walked out of the office slowly. The hallways were filled with children's laughter and chatter, but it felt far away, as if they were walking through a place that no longer welcomed them. On the steps outside, Mrs. Johnson stopped. She placed a hand on her husband's arm. "Did you hear how he spoke to us? As if our feelings mean nothing." Mr. Johnson looked out across the playground where children were running and playing. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Yes, I heard. But more importantly, I saw. He is shutting the door on us, Sarah. He is not ready to listen." She shook her head slowly. "How can someone who leads a school not see the pain of a child?" He sighed. "Sometimes pride blinds people. Sometimes they think admitting a problem means admitting failure. But this is not about failure. This is about care." That evening, Maya sat at the kitchen table, drawing quietly in her notebook. She had drawn a small figure standing alone at the edge of a playground, while other figures played together in groups. Mrs. Johnson's heart ached as she looked at it. She knelt beside her daughter. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" Maya hesitated, then whispered, "It's me." Her parents exchanged a long, painful glance. In that moment, they knew this was no misunderstanding. This was her reality, and it was hurting her deeply. Mr. Johnson gently touched Maya's shoulder. "Sweetheart, you are never alone. We are here for you. Always." That night, after Maya went to bed, the Johnsons sat together in the quiet living room. The lamp glowed softly, casting long shadows on the walls. Mrs. Johnson spoke first. "He is not listening. He thinks we are imagining this." Mr. Johnson nodded slowly. "Then we will find another way. We will not give up. If the principal refuses to see, perhaps others will. We can speak to the teachers. We can speak to the district. But we must stay calm, strong, and steady. For Maya." Mrs. Johnson leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're right. We can't stop now. Maya needs us to fight for her, even if it takes time." Meanwhile, in his office, Principal Harris locked the door for the night. He walked out into the dark parking lot, telling himself that he had done the right thing. "Parents always complain," he whispered under his breath. "They see problems where there are none." But deep down, something unsettled him. The image of Maya's small face, bright yet dimmed by sadness, lingered in his memory. For the first time, he felt a flicker of doubt. Still, he brushed it aside. He told himself that his job was to protect the school's image, not to deal with every small worry. What he did not know was that his dismissive words had already set something much larger in motion, something he would soon regret. The week passed slowly, but the weight on the Johnson family's shoulders only grew heavier. Each day, Maya returned from school quieter than the last. Her once bright laughter had become rare, and her spark seemed dimmed. The Johnsons had tried to raise their concerns gently, twice already, but they felt as if their voices had been pressed into silence. On Friday morning, Mrs. Johnson looked at her husband across the breakfast table. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed worry. "Daniel, We cannot let this go. Maya deserves better. We need to speak to him again. Mr. Johnson nodded. Yes. We will ask for another meeting today. But this time, we must be clear. We are not here to cause trouble, only to protect our child. If he refuses to listen again, then we will go to the district. One way or another, Maya will be heard. That afternoon, they walked into the school together, holding hands tightly. They were not angry, but determined. Their steps echoed softly through the hallways. The secretary looked up with a small, nervous smile. We'd like to meet with Principal Harris again, Mr. Johnson said politely. The secretary hesitated, then knocked on the principal's office door before leading them inside. Principal Harris looked up from his desk. His jaw tightened the moment he saw them. He had expected this. A part of him had hoped they would let it go, but here they were again. His pride flared. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, he said, forcing a smile. Back again so soon? Mrs. Johnson sat down quietly. Her voice was gentle but steady. Yes, Principal Harris. We came again because we are deeply worried about Maya. She is losing her joy for school. She feels invisible. We know you are busy, but this is important. Mr. Johnson added, we are not asking for special treatment. We are asking for fairness. We want Maya to feel seen, respected, and included. Every child deserves that. The principal listened, but his mind was clouded. Instead of hearing their concern, he felt their persistence as a challenge to his authority. His pride whispered, they are questioning your leadership. If you give in, others will think you are weak. He folded his arms. I have already told you children sometimes feel left out. That does not mean the school is failing. I cannot change the way things work just because one student feels unhappy. Mrs. Johnson's eyes grew wet, but she stayed calm. We are not saying the school is failing. We are saying that one child, our child, is hurting. And when even one child is hurting, it matters. The principal leaned forward, his voice firm. With respect, this is beginning to look like you are making accusations. If you continue in this way, it will cause unnecessary problems. Mr. Johnson frowned slightly, though his voice remained composed. We are not here to accuse anyone. We are here to protect our daughter. If you see this as a problem, then perhaps the problem lies in not being willing to listen. The room grew quiet. The air felt heavy. Inside, Principal Harris felt cornered. Instead of letting himself soften to their pain, he let fear and pride guide him. His thoughts grew louder, they are attacking me. They are making me look bad. If I don't stop this now, it will spread. And then, in a moment of poor judgment, he stood up and reached for the phone on his desk. I think this meeting is over, he said coldly. If you refuse to leave, I will have to call security. And if necessary, the police. The Johnsons froze. For a moment, neither spoke. They could not believe what they had just heard. Mrs. Johnson's lips trembled. We came here with open hearts, only to talk. You would call the police on us for speaking about our child. Mr. Johnson rose slowly from his chair. His face was calm, though his eyes held deep pain. We came in peace, Principal Harris. We asked for nothing but kindness. If this is how you choose to respond, then it says more about you than about us. The principal held the phone in his hand but hesitated. He had expected shouting, anger, perhaps even disrespect, but none came. Instead, he was faced with quiet dignity. The Johnsons did not fight, did not argue. They simply stood, ready to leave with grace. That dignity unsettled him more than anger ever could. As the Johnsons walked out of the office, the secretary glanced at them with wide, uncertain eyes. Whispers soon began to spread through the halls. Teachers noticed. Other parents heard. Word moved quickly, as it always does in a close community. By evening, the story was already being spoken in homes across the neighborhood. The Johnsons tried to talk to the principal about Maya, people said. And he threatened to call the police on them. Some parents shook their heads in disbelief. Others felt anger rising within them, not toward the Johnsons, but toward the principal's lack of care. Many had known Maya as a bright, cheerful child. They had seen her talent and kindness. The idea that her parents had been treated this way did not sit well. That night, at home, the Johnsons sat together in silence. The lamp glowed softly beside them. Mrs. Johnson finally spoke. "I can't believe he would go so far. We were calm, we were respectful, and still, he threatened us." Mr. Johnson nodded slowly. "It hurts. But maybe this is what must happen. Sometimes truth must pass through fire before it is seen. We wanted peace, but his actions have turned this into something larger." She leaned against him, her eyes heavy with sadness. "What do we do now?" He took her hand. "We keep standing. Not with anger, but with strength. Others will see. They already are. And in the end, truth will shine." Meanwhile, in his dark office, Principal Harris sat alone. The phone still rested on his desk, unused. He leaned back in his chair, his chest tight. He told himself he had done the right thing, that he had protected the school. Yet, deep inside, a small voice whispered that he had crossed a line. He silenced it quickly, convincing himself he was in control. But outside those walls, a storm was already brewing, one that would soon reach him in ways he never imagined. By Monday morning, the story of the Johnsons' meeting with Principal Harris had spread through the town like ripples across a still pond. What had started as a quiet conversation between two concerned parents and a school leader had now become the talk of classrooms, staff rooms, and family kitchens. Teachers whispered about it in the hallways. Parents discussed it while waiting to pick up their children. Even some of the older students had heard small pieces of the story. And while details were shared in different ways, one truth was clear to everyone: the Johnsons had spoken with care about their daughter, and the principal had chosen pride instead of patience. That morning, Mrs. Lee, one of Maya's teachers, walked into the teacher's lounge with a thoughtful expression. She had heard the news from another staff member and felt uneasy. "I don't know all the details," she said to her colleague, Mr. Patel, "but if what I've heard is true, this doesn't feel right. The Johnsons are kind people. I've seen how much they support Maya. They're not the type to cause trouble." Mr. Patel nodded. "I agree. Maya is a bright student. If her parents are worried, there must be something real behind it. Maybe instead of brushing them off, we should be listening too." Across the lounge, other teachers exchanged looks. Some had noticed Maya's quietness in class. Some had even wondered why she no longer raised her hand as often as before. Now, they began to piece together the signs they had overlooked. Outside the school, the conversation was even stronger. Parents stood near the playground, watching their children run and laugh, while their voices carried low but firm. "Did you hear what happened with the Johnsons?" one mother asked. Another nodded. "Yes, and I'm shocked. They only wanted to talk about Maya, and the principal threatened to call the police. That isn't how you treat parents who care about their child." A father spoke up. "It's not just about Maya. If he can treat them this way, what about the rest of us? What about our children?" The group fell silent for a moment, the thought settling deep in their hearts. At home, the Johnsons felt the weight of the moment, but they also felt something new: quiet support. Their phone began to ring with calls from other parents. Some spoke words of encouragement. Others shared their own small worries about how their children sometimes felt unseen. "We didn't want this to spread," Mrs. Johnson told one caller. "We only wanted the principal to listen." But maybe this is bigger than just us. Maybe this is about every child who feels invisible. Mr. Johnson listened quietly, then added, if people are willing to stand together, then perhaps change can happen. That evening, a group of parents gathered at the community center. It wasn't planned as a protest or an argument, it was simply a meeting of concerned families who wanted to talk. The Johnsons were there, sitting modestly at the edge of the circle. One parent stood and spoke. I don't think the Johnsons did anything wrong. They spoke with care, and they were dismissed. If this can happen to them, it can happen to any of us. We need a school that listens. Another parent added, we don't want conflict. We want partnership. The school should not be a place where parents feel shut out. The room hummed with agreement. Mrs. Johnson finally spoke, her voice gentle but steady. We never meant for this to become so large. We only wanted Maya to feel safe and included. But if our small story can open eyes, then maybe it has a purpose. Her words were met with quiet nods and thoughtful silence. Meanwhile, inside his office, Principal Harris sat behind his desk with furrowed brows. He had heard whispers of the community meeting. He knew the story was spreading faster than he could contain it. He told himself again that he had done the right thing, that he had protected the school's image. But as he looked around at the empty room, doubt pressed against him like a heavy weight. What if they're right? He thought, though only for a brief moment. Then pride rose again, and he shook the thought away. No, I am the leader here. They don't understand what it takes to run a school. But deep down, he knew the voices outside his walls were growing louder. The next day, something unexpected happened. During recess, Maya was sitting alone on a bench, her sketchbook open on her lap. She was quietly drawing shapes and patterns when another student, a girl from her class, approached her. Hey, Maya, the girl said softly. Do you want to play with us? We're starting a game. Maya looked up in surprise. For weeks she had been left out, unnoticed. Now, someone had reached out to her. She smiled shyly and nodded. Okay. As she ran off with the group, laughter returned to her face. It was a small moment, but her parents noticed it later when she came home and told them about her day. For the first time in weeks, her voice carried excitement again. Mrs. Johnson hugged her tightly. See? You are never invisible. You are shining, my love. That night, the Johnsons sat together once more. They had not planned to lead anything larger than their own family's journey, yet now they found themselves at the center of a growing community voice. Mr. Johnson held his wife's hand. Do you see what is happening, Sarah? People are waking up. They are beginning to see that this is not only about us. It's about every child, every parent. She nodded, though her eyes were still soft with worry. Yes. But I wonder if the principal understands yet. Or if he will only dig deeper into his pride. Mr. Johnson looked out the window at the quiet night sky. One thing is certain. The truth is spreading. And sooner or later, he will have to face it. And so, as the days moved forward, the Johnsons carried both hope and uncertainty in their hearts. The community was awakening, standing quietly beside them. And though the road ahead was still unclear, one thing was becoming undeniable: the story that began with a quiet complaint in a small office was now touching many lives. The principal had tried to silence their voices, but instead, their truth had become louder than ever. The days that followed were unlike any the school had seen before. The story of the Johnsons and Principal Harris had reached the district office. It was no longer a matter whispered in hallways or discussed only among parents. The school board had been alerted, and they decided to step in. One Monday morning, a letter arrived at the school, signed by the district superintendent. It announced that a small investigation team would be visiting to review the concerns of parents and ensure that every student felt safe and supported. When Principal Harris read the letter, His stomach tightened. He placed it on his desk and stared at the words, his face pale. His hands trembled slightly, though he quickly tucked them into his pockets to hide it, even though no one was watching. This shouldn't have gone this far, he whispered to himself. I only wanted to protect the school. I didn't mean for it to spread. That same morning, the Johnsons received a phone call from the district. A kind woman from the superintendent's office invited them to share their story in detail. Mrs. Johnson sat at the kitchen table, holding the phone close, her voice steady. Yes, we would be happy to speak. We never wanted things to grow this large, but we cannot let Maya feel invisible any longer. If our voice can help bring change, then we will speak. When she ended the call, she turned to her husband. They're coming to the school later this week. They'll talk to us, to teachers, to other parents. This time, someone is truly listening. Mr. Johnson nodded with quiet relief. Finally. On Wednesday, the district officials arrived. They were professional, calm, and respectful, moving through the school with clipboards in hand. They spoke to teachers one by one, asking about their classrooms, about Maya, and about the overall climate of the school. Some teachers admitted that Maya had seemed quieter lately. One teacher shared, she used to raise her hand often. But lately, she just sits silently. I didn't realize how serious it was until I heard what her parents said. The officials also listened to other parents in the community. Many spoke kindly of the school but admitted that sometimes communication with leadership felt difficult. Some even said they had felt brushed aside in the past, though never as strongly as the Johnsons had been. Each story, though small on its own, painted a larger picture. Meanwhile, Principal Harris sat alone in his office, waiting for his turn to be questioned. He stared at the wall, his thoughts heavy. For years, he had been proud of running a school with strong academics and a polished image. He believed that his firmness was what made the school successful. But now, for the first time, he began to question himself. Was I too harsh? He thought. Did I let my pride speak louder than my heart? He remembered the look in Mrs. Johnson's eyes, sad, but calm. He remembered Mr. Johnson's steady voice, carrying pain but also dignity. They had not shouted. They had not disrespected him. They had simply spoken for their child. And yet, he had treated them as if they were threats. The thought made his chest ache. Later that afternoon, the district officials entered his office. They greeted him politely and began their questions. Principal Harris, one of them began, we understand you had multiple meetings with the Johnsons. Can you share what happened from your perspective? He straightened his posture. His first instinct was to defend himself, to protect his pride. Yes, they came to me with concerns about their daughter. I told them children sometimes go through phases. I felt they were pushing too hard, and he paused, struggling with the words. I told them the meeting was over. The official looked at him closely. And did you threaten to call security or the police? Harris hesitated. He wanted to deny it, but the memory was too clear. He nodded slowly. Yes. I did. But only because I thought the situation was becoming too intense. The room fell quiet. The officials wrote notes on their papers. Finally, one spoke gently. Do you believe, looking back, that was the right choice? For the first time in years, Harris felt small in his own office. He lowered his eyes. No, he admitted softly. It was not the right choice. They were calm. They were respectful. I was the one who lost patience. The words left his mouth like stones falling into water. Heavy, but freeing. That evening, as Harris drove home, the world outside his window felt different. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink, much like the evening when the Johnsons had left his office weeks earlier. But now, instead of brushing off the memory, he let it sink in. He thought about Maya, her small figure, her bright mind. He wondered how many times she had felt invisible in his school while he was too focused on his reputation to notice. He thought about the Johnsons, who had stood up with dignity, even when he had tried to silence them. For the first time, regret pressed hard against his heart. At the Johnson home, the family sat together after dinner. Maya was smiling again, showing her parents the colorful drawing she had made of a garden full of flowers. Each flower had a bright color, and in the center of the page stood a tall tree with wide branches. "This is us," Maya explained proudly. "The flowers are my friends, and the tree is you and Mom. You always stand tall for me." Tears filled Mrs. Johnson's eyes as she hugged her daughter. Mr. Johnson placed a hand on Maya's head, his heart swelling with both pride and sorrow. "Thank you for showing us your garden," he said softly. "Never forget, Maya, you are one of the brightest flowers in it." That night, as the stars twinkled above, the Johnsons felt a sense of peace for the first time in weeks. They didn't know what the district's final decision would be, but they knew their voices had been heard. And in another home, not far away, Principal Harris sat quietly in his living room. His television was on, but he wasn't watching. He was thinking, reflecting, and realizing that for too long, he had led with pride instead of compassion. He whispered to himself, almost like a promise, "I need to change. I need to listen." For the first time, he truly understood the weight of regret. The next morning at school, Principal Harris arrived earlier than usual. He sat at his desk in silence, the sound of the clock ticking louder than it had ever felt before. His thoughts were heavy, but unlike the days before, he was no longer trying to defend himself. Instead, he was asking how he could repair what had been broken. He knew the investigation would continue, and the district would soon give their report. But Harris also realized that waiting quietly was not enough. If he truly wanted to lead, he had to take responsibility not only in words, but in actions. He opened his laptop and began typing. His fingers moved slowly at first, unsure of how to start. But then, the words came. He drafted a message addressed to all staff and parents, inviting them to a special community meeting at the school auditorium that Friday evening. "This school belongs to all of us," he wrote. "I want to hear your voices, your concerns, and your hopes. We cannot move forward unless we do it together." When he finished, he reread the message 3 times. His heart pounded as he pressed send. That Friday, the auditorium filled with parents, teachers, and even a few older students. The Johnsons arrived quietly, taking seats near the middle. Maya sat between her parents, holding her mother's hand. She looked around curiously, sensing the importance of the moment even though she was young. The atmosphere in the room was cautious. Some parents whispered to each other, unsure of what to expect. Teachers sat in small groups, their eyes turning toward the stage where Principal Harris stood, waiting for the gathering to settle. When the room finally quieted, Harris stepped forward to the microphone. His voice shook at first, but he steadied it. "Good evening, everyone," he began. "Thank you for coming. I know many of you were surprised to receive my invitation. But I felt it was necessary. This school has been facing challenges that I cannot ignore. And I must admit many of those challenges began with me." A hush fell across the room. Harris took a slow breath before continuing. "I want to speak openly tonight. A few weeks ago, I dismissed the concerns of parents who came to me with love for their child. Instead of listening, I let my pride take control. I spoke harshly, and I even threatened something that never should have been spoken in a school built on trust. That was my failure. And for that, I am deeply sorry." In the audience, Mrs. Johnson felt her throat tighten. She glanced at her husband, who sat upright, listening carefully. Maya looked up at her parents, sensing the weight of the words even if she did not fully understand them. Harris continued, his tone softening. I have spent years focusing on test scores, appearances, and achievements. But I forgot the most important part of a school: the children. Their hearts, their voices, their feelings. Without them, nothing else matters. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. I want to change. And I know change cannot come from me alone. That is why I am asking you parents, teachers, and students to guide me. Tell me what this school needs to truly be a safe and welcoming place for every child. The room was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, one parent stood. We need to feel heard, she said gently. Sometimes, it feels like decisions are made without our voices. Another teacher spoke next. We need more training on how to support children emotionally, not just academically. Voices began to rise, one after another, not in anger, but in honesty. Parents spoke about communication. Teachers mentioned the importance of empathy. A few older students even shared their hopes for a school where everyone could feel proud to belong. And through it all, Harris listened. He did not interrupt, did not defend himself. He simply listened and took notes. Finally, Mr. Johnson rose to his feet. The room grew quiet again. He looked directly at the principal, his voice steady. Thank you for holding this meeting, he said. When my wife and I came to you, we did not want conflict. We only wanted to protect our daughter. That day, we left feeling powerless. But tonight, hearing you acknowledge your mistake, I feel something different. I feel hope. This school can be better. Not just for Maya, but for every child. What matters is not what happened before, but what happens next. Harris swallowed hard, his eyes misting slightly. He nodded. You are right, Mr. Johnson. What happens next will define us. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. When it ended, people did not rush out. Instead, small groups stayed behind, speaking with one another, sharing ideas and encouragement. For the first time in weeks, the air inside the school felt lighter. As the Johnsons prepared to leave, Harris stepped down from the stage and walked toward them. He stopped a few feet away, his voice quiet. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, he said, I owe you both a personal apology. And to you, Maya, I owe you one as well. He looked at the little girl with kind eyes. I should have listened to your parents sooner. I should have seen your voice, your worth. I cannot undo what happened, but I can promise to do better. Maya blinked up at him, then glanced at her parents. Mrs. Johnson smiled softly, squeezing her daughter's hand. Thank you for saying that, she replied. We accept your words, and we hope to see your actions reflect them. Harris nodded. You will. That night, after the meeting ended and the school emptied, Harris remained in the auditorium alone. The rows of chairs stood silent, but he could still feel the presence of the voices that had filled the room. He sat in the front row and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt not just like a leader, but like a learner. He realized that true leadership meant humility, and humility meant listening. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, he was ready to walk it. And for the Johnsons, driving home under the soft glow of the streetlights, there was peace in their hearts. Their voices had been heard, their child's worth had been recognized, and hope had returned. The story was not over, but a new chapter had begun. Weeks passed since the community meeting, and little by little, change began to take root at the school. Principal Harris worked tirelessly to rebuild trust, meeting with teachers, students, and parents regularly. He no longer viewed listening as a task to endure, but as the foundation of leadership. Maya returned to her usual bright self. She laughed again in the hallways, raised her hand in class, and joined her friends during recess. Her parents watched quietly, relieved and grateful, knowing the battles of the past weeks had made this return to joy possible. The first sign of lasting change came in the form of a new program introduced by the school. Called Every Voice Matters, it created small weekly meetings where students could share their experiences, parents could speak openly with teachers, and staff could listen and respond with care. Mrs. Lee, Maya's teacher, explained it to the class on the first day. "This is a place where we all get to be heard," she said. "No voice is too small. Every feeling matters. And together, we can make our school a better place for everyone." Maya's eyes sparkled as she raised her hand. "Does that mean we can talk about when we feel sad or left out?" "Yes," Mrs. Lee replied with a smile. "Every feeling deserves attention, just like every question deserves an answer." Maya squeezed her mother's hand under the desk. Her parents smiled back, seeing the excitement in her eyes they had feared was lost. Principal Harris also made personal efforts to reconnect with families. He began holding monthly open office hours, where parents could speak with him freely without appointments. Teachers were encouraged to share concerns and ideas directly, and the staff meetings became more collaborative than ever before. He even visited classrooms more often, not to check on grades, but to simply watch the students, listen to their laughter, and notice the small things that made each child unique. The pride he had once placed above all else was now replaced by a quiet joy that came from seeing children truly happy and supported. One Friday, the Johnsons were invited to speak at the Every Voice Matters assembly. They stepped onto the stage, holding hands and smiling at the faces before them: teachers, students, parents, all gathered in support. Mrs. Johnson began. "We are honored to be here today. We never expected to speak to so many people, but we want to say something important. Every child deserves to be seen, to be heard, and to feel safe. When we stand together, when we listen to each other, amazing things can happen." Mr. Johnson added, "Our journey with Maya reminded us that change often begins with courage. Courage to speak, courage to listen, and courage to do better. Thank you to everyone here for choosing to listen and to act." Maya stepped forward shyly, holding a drawing she had made. It was of the school surrounded by flowers, children holding hands around it, and a bright sun shining overhead. "This is our school," she said softly. "Everyone belongs here. And we can make it even happier if we all care for each other." The audience clapped, not just politely, but with real warmth. Parents wiped tears from their eyes, teachers smiled with pride, and Harris felt something he had not felt in a long time, a true sense of fulfillment. In the following months, the school's atmosphere shifted noticeably. Teachers worked together with more collaboration, parents felt empowered to share their ideas, and students learned not only academics but also empathy, respect, and community values. Conflicts were addressed calmly, problems were solved together, and the small acts of listening and caring multiplied every day. Even Principal Harris noticed a change in himself. He walked through the hallways without feeling the need to control everything. He laughed with students over small jokes, complimented teachers on their creativity, and learned to admit when he didn't have all the answers. Pride no longer ruled him, humility and care guided his leadership. One afternoon, Maya ran to her parents after school, waving a piece of paper excitedly. "Mom! Dad! Look!" They took the paper and read it together. It was a short story Maya had written about a small tree in the middle of a playground that grew taller and stronger because every child watered it with kindness, understanding, and friendship. Mrs. Johnson hugged her tightly. "This is beautiful, Maya. You put into words what we all feel." Mr. Johnson smiled. "And this story will remind everyone that small actions like kindness and listening can make a big difference." Maya beamed. "That's what I wanted to show." That evening, Principal Harris walked past the playground and watched the students play. He noticed Maya laughing with friends, running freely across the grass. He felt a gentle warmth in his chest and whispered to himself, "This is why we lead. This is why we listen. This is why we care." He thought of the Johnsons and the courage they had shown, and he silently thanked them for teaching him a lesson that no report, meeting, or lecture could ever have taught. The story that began with misunderstanding, fear, and hurt had grown into something stronger: understanding, hope, and unity. The Johnsons had protected their child's voice, the community had rallied, and the principal had learned the power of listening. And for Maya, every day became a reminder that she mattered not only to her parents but to the school, her friends, and the larger community. The school, once a place of tension and silence for her, had become a place of laughter, learning, and belonging. And as the sun set on the playground, the golden light reflected on smiling faces, a symbol of a new beginning for everyone. Hope, after all, had a way of shining brightest after the darkest days.